morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist congregation in Terre, Haute. In lieu of our usual opening welcome, I'm going to read you a letter written earlier this week by the Reverend Langston Smith, a UU minister. She opens this with an epigraph, a quote from Maya Angelou. "My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style." The Reverend Smith says, "I write to you today as a black Unitarian Universalist, a black woman, a black mother, and a black minister. How is it with your spirit today? Today, my spirit is struck by grief. I trust in the possibility of change, and I know that there is a place for me in bringing about that change. But the grief is deep. Underneath grief and anger, there is a fierce love that is a saving grace. I don't know how it is for you," she says, "but I love being black. I love black skin, all the varieties of it, and black hair and black voices. It's a pleasure to be part of communities so beautiful and diverse, communities that have encountered a world of sorrow and have countered with creativity and intellect and embodied resilience. It's an honor to be part of a lineage that includes Ella Baker and James Baldwin, Michelle Obama, and my Granny Inez, Audre Lorde and Jimmy Cliff. The well of my grief and anger is deep, but the well of my love and gratitude is deeper still. Blackness is a healing balm." What does it mean to survive when so many of us have died recently, unable to breathe? George Floyd and Eric Garner before him, killed by a broken system of policing. Tens of thousands of black people killed by COVID-19. Then there's the economic devastation due to the pandemic, which is ravaging our communities, and the pervasive violence visited on black trans folks. Tony McDade, I say your name. The roots of these traumas extend down through the centuries. I have to remind myself often to breathe, a practice I learned years ago from healers who understood deep truths about recovery from trauma. Not long ago, one of my colleagues at the UUA posted a 5 senses meditation helpful for people experiencing anxiety. I share it as a gift, adaptable to whatever senses are available to you. It begins with the breath. Find a quiet place and take a few deep breaths. Then notice 5 things you can hear, 4 things you can see, 3 things you can feel, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. Take a few more breaths. As you navigate these days, as you discover how to take care of yourself and those you love, how to participate in movements of liberation, may you carry with you the gift of your breath, the beauty of your being, the miracle of your living body, and the vibrant legacy of our elders, ancestors, and communities. Take care, dear folks. Lauren. And the Reverend Langston Smith's biography here on the UU World webpage reads as follows. The Reverend Langston Smith is Director of Stewardship and Development at the Unitarian Universalist Association. She oversees the UUA's fundraising efforts, including annual program fund contributions from member congregations. And that was pretty close to the best reading I could imagine finding for this week. In the course of the last 2 weeks, having skipped a recorded service, I have entirely lost track of where we were in the sequence of the principles and purposes of the Unitarian Universalist Association, and so I'm going to read them all without comment. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. At this time, I'm going to light the chalice and really get the service going. A little while ago, I sang a hymn for us. I was not on top of things enough to arrange for Betsy Bear to know hymns to sing, and so I thought I had better fill the gap. So I have sung here hymn number 149, Lift Every Voice and Sing, which I know because the first UU church that I attended, called the First Church in Jamaica Plain, Unitarian Universalist in Boston, had this as one of the 3 hymns in every service in February every year. We had at that point the black minister and a white minister, and well, that was quite the thing to stand and sing this in what was a fairly multiracial neighborhood, one that was probably gentrifying and suffering some of the difficulties of gentrifying neighborhoods, but that also had all the possibilities of a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multinational neighborhood.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, Thou who hast by Thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met Thee, lest our hearts drunk with the wine of the world we forget Thee. Shadowed beneath Thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
At this point, without a written script this week. I'm going to see if I can remember it all in a plausible order. I believe this is the point where I would comment on the congregation's need for money. Thank you for bearing with the congregation through nearly 3 months of video services. Let me assure you that I know from the board that whatever happens in the next weeks about in-person services, there will definitely be continuing video services. When in-person services start, the video services won't be available immediately, but they'll be available fairly soon, we hope. Perhaps not on Sunday, it might be Monday, but they will be there for you. Since we all know that many people will not be safe or feel comfortable should they attend an in-person service. And plans are designed for that. I imagine that at least some weeks we will also continue to provide hymns with text on the screen so that people can sing along at home, whether the hymns are played but not sung in the in-person services, or whether they're done separately. Knowing that music is an important part of the service. Dottie Stone wants me to ask anybody watching this service this week to take a picture of flowers from whatever source derived and send it to her by email before next weekend so that she can include it in a virtual flower communion service for the 14th of June. At this time, I'm kind of knocked over by the last couple of weeks in the country and the world, and can only really think to simply ask people to think about hope and what they can do to bring change and what they can do to comfort people who are suffering, and to remember everybody who needs to be remembered, everybody who feels a loss or a joy or both at once, and to think of those people. From protesters to graduates to victims of violence wherever they may be found, for all of us, for the great work that remains for all of us to do for a better society. Problems of racism, problems of injustice, however caused, all that it is so obvious to us that we must fix.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
What follows is Bill Breeden's request for a transitional reading. It's a poem by Langston Hughes, read at the Loft Literary Center, that we are putting in entire into the service, including the introductory material, so that it's quite clear to you where it came from and where you might go to look up more of their work. And then will come Bill Breeden's sermon.
Let America Be America Again by Langston Hughes. Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain seeking a home where he himself is free. America was never America to me. Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great, strong land of love where never kings connive nor tyrants scheme, that any man be crushed by one above. It was never America to me. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free, equality in the air we breathe. There's never been equality for me, nor freedom in this homeland of the free. Say, who are you that mumbles in the dark? And who are you that draws your veil across the stars? I am the poor, white, fooled and pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery scars. I am the red man driven from the land. I am the immigrant clutching the hope I seek and finding only the same old stupid plan of dog eat dog, of mighty crush the weak. I am the young man full of strength and hope, tangled in that ancient endless chain of profit, power, gain, of grab the land, of grab the gold, of grab the ways of satisfying need, of work the men, of take the pay, of owning everything for one's own greed. I am the farmer, bondsman to the soil. I am the worker, sold to the machine. I am the Negro, servant to you all. I am the people, humble, hungry, mean, hungry yet today, despite the dream, beaten yet today. Oh, pioneers, I am the man who never got ahead. I am the poorest worker bartered through the years yet. I am the one who dreamt our basic dream in the old world while still a serf of kings, who dreamt a dream so strong, so brave, so true, that even yet its mighty daring sings in every brick and stone, in every furrow turned that's made America the land it has become. Oh, I am the man who sailed those early seas in search of what I meant to be my home. For I am the one who left dark Ireland's shore and Poland's plain and England's grassy lay, and torn from black Africa's strand to build a homeland of the free. The free? Who said the free? Not me. Surely not me. The millions on relief today, the millions shot down when we strike, the millions who have nothing for our pay, for all the dreams we've dreamed and all the songs we've sung and all the hopes we've held and all the flags we've hung, the millions who have nothing for our pay except the dream that's almost dead today. Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has yet been and yet must be the land where every man is free, the land that's mine, the poor man's, Indians, Negroes, me, who made America, whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain must bring back our mighty dream again. Sure, call me any ugly name you choose. The steel of freedom does not stain. From those who live like leeches on people's lives, we must take back our land again. America, oh yes, I say it plain. America was never America to me. And yet I swear this oath, America will be Out of the rake and ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot of graft, of stealth and lies, we, the people, must redeem the land, the mines, the plants, the rivers, the mountains, and the endless plain. All the stretch of these great green states, and make America again.
Good morning. It's good to be virtually with you folks in Terre, Haute, and all of you out there on the web of life. Preaching from a distance is far more difficult than in person. iPhones don't respond, and I can't just back up and do over. But it is what it is until it becomes something different, and so we deal with it. I would like to begin with a communal hug this morning. I'm suffering from hug deprivation. Although Glenda does her best to alleviate the most serious symptoms of this disorder, I really miss hugging many folks that I love and care about. I try to make it up by hugging Glenda and our dog Obi. I draw the line at the chickens and the duck. I really don't find them very huggable, and they don't seem to require hugs. So begin by hugging yourself. Really give yourself a good hugging now. You deserve it. You have made it to another day. Hug those with whom you have no requirement of distance. Take a hug from them. Take a long hug. Take all the hugging you can get. It's good for the body and it's good for the soul. Finally, give a big virtual hug this morning to the planet and to all of our relatives. Metakwe Oyasin, as my Lakota friends taught me long ago, all my relatives. Those who are familiar with me and my history as a minister know that any sermon topic announced in advance is subject to change without notice, and this last week has changed my mind in terms of what I'm doing today, although we'll combine the ideas that were there all along. For the first time in American history, the President of the United States and his family were led to a bunker in the basement of the White House to protect them from their own citizens, although there was never any threat from their own citizens. Bunkers are usually the last bastions for dictators whose tyranny is coming to an end, or for terrorists who are enraged by special forces. I thought at the time I read of his trip to the bunker, at least Nero could play fiddle. Then on Wednesday of this past week, a group of peaceful protesters were beaten and tear gassed to clear the way for a wannabe emperor to boldly go where no president has gone before, marching behind a phalanx of troops to display a Bible in front of St. John's, the Church of the Presidents. All of this craziness drove me back to a philosopher I studied 50 years ago when I read Albert Camus' classic novel, The Plague. The book recounts the lives of citizens of a fictionalized modern town of Oran on the coast of Algeria. The citizens live ordinary lives, and going about their day-to-day business are said to barely notice they're alive. Then a Dr. Rieu, a version of Albert Camus himself, comes across a dead rat, and then another, and then another, and before long there are thousands of dead rats all over the city. The authorities at first are slow to respond, but eventually all the rats are removed and cleaned up, and things settle down. But then they don't. It reads like a thriller. The populace goes back to normal life, but the doctor knows about animal to human transmission and fears the plague is coming, and it wouldn't be a thriller if it didn't. So it did. The book could have been written yesterday and might have been written tomorrow. Camus is often referred to as the philosopher of the absurd. Who better to provide us with some moral sensibility in times such as this? Camus draws out the inherent similarity between plagues and wars and people's response to them. Reflecting on citizens' denial of the extent of the threat, Camus writes, "When a war breaks out, people say, 'It's too stupid. It can't last long.' But though a war may well be too stupid, that doesn't prevent its lasting. Stupidity has a knack of getting its own way, as we should see if we were not always so wrapped up in ourselves." End quote. Stupidity has a knack of getting its own way. That's hard to argue with. The plague of racism. Stupidity has a knack of getting its own way. Think of the marches of a few weeks ago, when in spite of the science, in spite of the models showing the risk confronting us, people marched in state houses demanding the right to get a haircut in the midst of a pandemic. Thousands of people demanded the right to go back to normal in the midst of a pandemic, a plague. A week or so ago, my son and I rode our motorcycles around to visit folks at a distance and to just enjoy a ride through the country. We stopped at the home of Reverend Marion Macklin, my co-minister for 13 years and now senior minister at UU Church of Bloomington. On the front of my cycle, I have a sign that is strapped to the windshield that reads in large print, "Resist fascism, embrace democracy." So we were sitting out on the street, and Marianne and her partner Deb were in the yard, and we were talking back and forth, standing beside our motorcycles, and a man in his early 60s, I would say, came half jogging down the street and kind of slowed down, read the sign on my motorcycle and said, "I like that sign." I said, "Well, thank you very much." He said, "Yeah, doesn't this shutdown suck?" I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I kind of like the shutdown." His response was, "Well, why do you give up your freedom so easily?" I said, "Well, I gave up my freedom to drive in the left lane because it protects everyone. And when something that protects everyone protects me, doesn't it?" He said, "Well, I never thought about it like that." And we had a few minutes conversation. I don't want to suggest that the man was stupid. In fact, his willingness to have a dialogue without losing his temper was evidence of education and intelligence. However, the crowds that railed against the shutdown seemed to exhibit that very behavior of which Camus wrote, that of being wrapped up in themselves. Wrapped up in ourselves, he said. Here is another paragraph that is so relevant to our time. And I quote, "Sometimes at midnight, in the great silence of the sleep-bound town, the doctor turned on his radio before going to bed. For a few hours' sleep he allowed himself. And from the ends of the earth, across thousands of miles of land and sea, kindly, well-meaning speakers tried to speak their fellow feeling, and indeed did so, but at the same time proved the utter incapacity of every man truly to share in suffering that he cannot see." End quote. A few weeks ago, I read the story of one of the top physicians in New York City who committed suicide as a result of things she experienced in the ERs and the ICUs during the height of the dying in her city. I'm convinced most of the citizens of our nation will help the suffering they see, but cannot see the suffering of those beyond their own limited horizons. We need to see the suffering of others and know that it is our suffering too. This morning I chose to share with you the words of Langston Hughes in his classic poem, "Let America Be America Again," because it uncovers the suffering that has been in the heart of Black America for generations. Black Americans do not need white heroes. They need Americans who see and understand the suffering of the victims of the plague of racism. Dr. Hughes states at one point, this whole thing is not about heroism. It's about decency. It may seem a ridiculous idea, but the only way to fight the plague is with decency. A character asks Ryu what decency is, and Dr. Ryu's response is as clipped as it is eloquent. In general, I can't say, but in my case, I know that it consists in doing my job. Decency. Is that not what we need today? Simple decency? Simply doing our jobs as human beings? My daughter dropped by for a distancing chat this past week. She had been thinking about the world in which we live, and we got into a discussion about heroes and victims. She said that she believes that part of our problem is that we see the world as being made up of heroes, villains, and victims, as if those three personalities complete the picture, when in reality there are many others. There are storytellers, there are bystanders, there are teachers, and on and on. Everything does not boil down to heroism, villainy, and victimization. It is simply not that simple. Camus' doctor says, well, personally, I've seen enough people who die for an idea. I don't believe in heroism. I know it's easy, and I've learned that it can be murderous. What interests me is living and dying for what one loves. Living and dying for what one loves. Now we confront our own plagues, one of disease of the body and the other a disease of the mind, or perhaps the soul of America. It is important to understand that while medical research and reasoned precautions are the best defense of COVID-19, decency is the best defense for the racism and the plague of brutality that we are witnessing. Camus writes, all I maintain is that on this earth there are pestilences and there are victims, and it is up to us, so as far as possible, not to join forces with the pestilences. And again, he says, the evil in the world comes almost always from ignorance, and goodwill can cause as much damage as ill will if it is not enlightened. People are more often good than bad, though in fact that is not the question. But they are more or less ignorant, and this is what calls vice or virtue, the most appalling vice being the ignorance that thinks it knows everything and which consequently authorizes itself to kill. The murderer's soul is blind, and there is no true goodness or fine love without the greatest possible degree of clear-sightedness, end quote. The appalling vice being the ignorance that thinks it knows everything, which consequently authorizing itself to kill. As I saw that picture of the officer on his knee of George Floyd, I have never seen a picture that more exemplifies the authorization to kill, the right to kill. The image of that man explains the vice of which Camus was talking about. It was a perfect picture of that. The greatest possible degree of clear-sightedness is required. Although the plague and the absurdity of life can be depressing, there is an antidote: clear-sightedness, true goodness, fine love, and decency. This past week in America and across the globe, we have seen more love than violence on the part of our global community. The brutal murder of George Floyd has galvanized the force of love to a movement that shows no sign of abatement. All over the planet, people are marching for justice. George Floyd's young daughter, 6-year-old Gianna, said, "My daddy changed the world." He did. Even as he said, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe," and cried, "Mama," for his deceased mother. He was crying out to all the mamas in the world. He was crying out for all those who cannot breathe. I believe that we may be at the beginning of a tsunami of steadfast love which can turn back the flood of fascism that threatens our nation and our world. Perhaps this is a time when people all over the world will recognize what Camus meant when he wrote, "A loveless world is a dead world." And always there comes an hour when one is weary of prisons, of one's work, of one's devotion to duty, and all one craves for is a loved face, the warmth and wonder of a loving heart. I invite you this morning to give the world a loving face. Give the world the warmth and wonder of a loving heart. We will overcome. We will overcome not someday, but this day, by being a kind face and a loving heart to all those we encounter. I invite you again this morning to hug yourself and hug the one with you and hug the whole world, because hugs are good. Blessed be.
Okay, we're going to repeat in fairly quick succession from an earlier time. We Shall Overcome as a closing hymn. The closing words are number 579, The Limits of Tyrants by Frederick Douglass. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are people who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out what people will submit to, and you have found out the exact amount of injustice which will be imposed upon them. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. And I've actually decided to take the departure from our custom of a second closing reading from a contemporary of Frederick Douglass's. It's quite possible they knew each other. It's number 457 in the hymnal, from Edward Everett Hale. I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do. May the blessings of love rest upon you. May peace abide with you. May God's presence illuminate your heart now and forevermore. Be at peace and know that you are loved and that your life is sacred.